Marcus Chen pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the cargo hold, listening to the rhythmic thrum of the transport ship's engines. The vessel shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and through the small porthole he could see the crimson planet of Zerathi Prime growing larger against the star-filled void. His destination. His possible death sentence. The other passengers in the cramped transport were a mixed bunch of alien species, most of them traders or diplomats heading to the Neutral Zone conference. None of them knew that among them sat a man carrying forged identification papers and enough hidden weapons to start a small war. Marcus adjusted the collar of his worn leather jacket, feeling the weight of the plasma knife concealed beneath it. 24 hours ago, he had been drinking synthetic whiskey in a dive bar on the Outer Rim when the message arrived. The hologram that appeared above his communicator showed a figure shrouded in darkness, but the voice was unmistakably feminine and carried an accent he couldn't place. Marcus Chen, former Alliance Marine, dishonorably discharged for insubordination. Current occupation, freelance problem solver. The voice had a musical quality despite its serious tone. I have a job for you. One that pays more than you've ever seen. Interested? Marcus had almost deleted the message without responding. Anonymous job offers usually meant trouble, and he had enough of that already. But something about the voice made him pause. There was pain in it, carefully hidden, but still detectable to someone who had learned to read between the lines of human suffering. I'm listening, he had replied. Zerathi Prime, the Royal Quarter. Be at the Sapphire Garden Cantina tomorrow at sunset. Come alone and come armed. You'll know me when you see me. The transmission ended before he could ask questions, but the payment that transferred to his account moments later answered most of them. More credits than he had seen in 5 years of mercenary work. Enough to buy a ship, maybe even a small moon. Whatever this job was, it was either incredibly important or incredibly dangerous. Probably both. Now, as the transport began its descent through Zerathi Prime's atmosphere, Marcus reviewed what he knew about the planet. It was a neutral world, technically independent, but practically controlled by the Xeric Empire through a complex web of treaties and trade agreements. The Xeric were a proud species, humanoid but with distinctive blue-tinted skin and elaborate bone ridges that ran along their foreheads and down their spines. They were also warriors, with a culture that valued honor above all else. The Royal Quarter was the heart of Xeric civilization on Zerathi Prime, home to the planetary governor and the various noble houses that maintained the planet's delicate political balance. It was also heavily guarded, with security checkpoints at every major intersection and patrol drones that could detect most standard weapons. Getting in would be easy enough with his forged papers, but getting out might be another matter entirely. The transport landed with a gentle bump, and Marcus gathered his single travel bag. He had packed light, a few changes of clothes, basic survival gear, and his weapons carefully concealed in hidden compartments. As he walked down the ramp onto the landing platform, the warm air of Zerathi Prime hit him like a physical weight. The planet had a slightly higher gravity than Earth's standard, and the air was thick with the scent of exotic spices and industrial exhaust. The spaceport was a marvel of alien architecture, with sweeping curves and soaring arches that seemed to defy gravity. Xeric citizens moved through the crowds with graceful efficiency, their elaborate clothing marking their social status as clearly as military insignia. Marcus kept his head down and his movements casual as he made his way through customs. The Xeric official who checked his papers gave him a cursory glance and waved him through without comment. The Royal Quarter lay at the heart of the city, accessible by a network of maglev trains that ran through transparent tubes suspended high above the streets. Marcus bought a ticket and found a seat near the back of the car, watching the city flow past below him. Zerathi Prime was beautiful in its own way, with buildings that seemed to grow from the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. Gardens and fountains were everywhere, and the afternoon sun cast everything in a warm golden light. The Sapphire Garden Cantina was exactly what Marcus had expected, an upscale establishment that catered to the wealthy and powerful. The exterior was decorated with intricate mosaics that depicted scenes from Xeric mythology, and the doorway was flanked by guards in ceremonial armor. Marcus showed his identification again and was allowed inside after a discreet but thorough weapons scan. His concealed arsenal remained undetected, a testament to the quality of his hiding places and the scanner operator's assumption that no one would be foolish enough to bring weapons into such a heavily monitored area. The interior of the cantina was dimly lit and filled with the soft sound of alien music. Tables were arranged around a central garden where bioluminescent plants provided a gentle blue glow. Marcus ordered a drink at the bar and found a table with a good view of the entrance. According to his chronometer, sunset was still an hour away. He didn't have to wait that long. She walked in like she owned the place, which Marcus reflected she probably did. Queen Lysara of the Zarek Empire was even more striking in person than in the holographic images he had seen during his research on the transport. Her blue skin had an almost metallic sheen in the cantina's lighting, and her bone ridges were decorated with intricate silver inlays that marked her royal status. She wore a simple but elegant dress that somehow managed to look both formal and practical, and her long dark hair was pulled back in an elaborate braid, but it was her eyes that caught Marcus's attention. They were the deep purple color of Zarek royalty, and they held a weight of sadness that seemed at odds with her regal bearing. She moved with the fluid grace of a trained warrior, and Marcus noticed the way her hand never strayed far from the ceremonial dagger at her hip. She spotted him immediately, as he had known she would. Their eyes met across the crowded cantina, and she nodded almost imperceptibly before making her way to his table. The other patrons gave her a wide berth, and Marcus could hear whispered conversations in a dozen different languages as she approached. Mr. Chen. Her voice was exactly as he remembered from the transmission, musical but with an underlying tension. Thank you for coming, Your Majesty. Marcus stood and offered a slight bow, the kind of minimal courtesy that acknowledged her rank without suggesting subservience. Though I have to admit I'm curious why you need a human mercenary. She gestured for him to sit, then took the chair across from him. Up close, he could see that her regal composure was carefully maintained. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the drink he had ordered for her. Because, Mr. Chen, I am about to ask you to do something that no Zarek warrior would survive. And because humans have a reputation for doing the impossible when properly motivated. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her face. I'm listening. Queen Lysara took a sip of her drink, then fixed him with that penetrating purple gaze. 3 days ago, my daughter was kidnapped by the Shadow Syndicate. They are holding her on Korath Station, deep in the Void Sector. They want me to abdicate in favor of my cousin, Prince Kalar, who has been conspiring with them to overthrow my rule. The Void Sector. Marcus knew the name and felt a chill run down his spine. It was a region of space where several different criminal organizations had carved out territories, operating outside the reach of any legitimate government. Korath Station was reportedly the most dangerous place in the sector, a sprawling orbital city where anything could be bought or sold, including people. Why not send your fleet? Surely the Zarek military could start a war that would consume half the galaxy, Queen Lysara interrupted. Korath Station is technically neutral territory. Any direct military action would be seen as an act of aggression by the other powers. Besides, my daughter is being held in the station's core, surrounded by civilians. A military assault would result in massive casualties. Marcus nodded slowly. So you need someone who can get in quietly, extract your daughter, and get out without starting an interstellar incident. And you're willing to pay a fortune for it. I am willing to pay far more than a fortune, Mr. Chen. I am willing to give you something that no amount of money can buy. She reached into a hidden pocket of her dress and withdrew a small crystalline device. It pulsed with inner light, and Marcus could feel a strange energy radiating from it even across the table. This is a Zarek Life Bond crystal. It is attuned to my genetic signature and contains a fragment of my life essence. Whoever carries this crystal will be under my personal protection with all the rights and privileges that entails. More importantly, should you be injured while in my service, the crystal will heal you and grant you abilities that your species has never known. Marcus stared at the crystal, fascinated despite himself. What kind of abilities? Enhanced physical capabilities. Accelerated healing. Improved reflexes and strength. Each time you are wounded while protecting what is mine, the crystal will remake you stronger than before. It is an ancient magic, one that has been used by Zarek royalty for thousands of years to reward those who serve with true loyalty. And the catch? Queen Lysara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The bond is permanent, Mr. Chen. Once you accept this crystal, you will be connected to me for the rest of your life. You will feel my pain, my joy, my fear, and I will feel yours. It is not a gift to be accepted lightly. Marcus picked up his drink and took a long swallow, using the time to think. The job was dangerous, probably suicidal, but the reward she was offering was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Enhanced abilities, magical healing, and a connection to one of the most powerful women in the galaxy. It was tempting, incredibly tempting. Why me? He asked finally. You could hire a team of professionals, people with more experience in this kind of operation. Because, Queen Lysara said softly, I have seen your service record, Mr. Chen. I know why you were discharged from the Alliance Marines. You disobeyed orders to save civilians on Taurus 7, knowing it would end your career. You chose to do what was right instead of what was easy. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Marcus felt old memories stirring, painful ones he usually tried to keep buried. Taurus 7 had been a disaster from start to finish, a civilian evacuation gone wrong when rebel forces attacked the spaceport. His commanding officer had ordered a retreat, willing to sacrifice hundreds of innocent people to save his own troops. Marcus had refused the order and led a rescue mission that saved every civilian in the compound. It had also cost the lives of 12 good Marines and earned him a dishonorable discharge for insubordination. "My daughter's name is Zara," Queen Lysara continued, pulling out a holographic projector and activating it. The image showed a young Zarek female, perhaps 18 years old by human standards, with the same purple eyes as her mother but a more delicate bone structure. "She is strong-willed and intelligent, but she has never been in real danger before. I fear what the Shadow Syndicate might do to break her spirit." Marcus looked at the hologram and saw something that made his decision for him. The girl's eyes held the same sadness as her mother's, but there was also a defiant spark that reminded him of another young person he had failed to save on Taurus 7. His squadmate's younger sister, who had been visiting the colony when the rebels attacked. She had died in his arms while waiting for evacuation transport that never came. "I'll do it," he said quietly, "but I have conditions." Queen Lysara nodded. "Name them." "First, I work alone. No backup, no support team, no one who can be compromised or turned against me. Second, I get complete operational freedom. No micromanaging, no political considerations. I do whatever it takes to get your daughter back safely. Third, if I don't come back, you make sure the families of the Marines who died on Taurus 7 get the recognition they deserve." Agreed. Queen Lysara reached across the table and placed the life bond crystal in his palm. The moment his fingers closed around it, Marcus felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as if every cell in his body suddenly came alive, humming with potential. He could sense Queen Lysara's presence in his mind, a warm and comforting weight that somehow didn't feel like an intrusion. "The bond is formed," she said, and he could hear wonder in her voice. "I can feel your determination, Mr. Chen. It burns like a star." Marcus pocketed the crystal and stood. "When do I leave?" "Immediately." "I have a ship waiting at the private spaceport. The pilot will take you as far as the edge of the void sector, but from there, you're on your own. Korath Station doesn't welcome official vessels." As they left the cantina together, Marcus felt the weight of the crystal against his chest and the strange new awareness of Queen Lysara's emotions flowing through the bond. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a purpose beyond simple survival. He was going to save an innocent girl and maybe find some measure of redemption for the ghosts that had haunted him since Taurus 7. He had no idea that this mission would change him in ways that went far beyond the magical enhancements promised by the life bond crystal. He was about to discover that sometimes the greatest rewards come not from the treasures we seek, but from the courage we find within ourselves when everything we value is at stake. The transport ship that would take him to the edge of known space was sleek and fast, with unmarked hull plating that suggested it was designed for discretion rather than comfort. As Marcus settled into the pilot's cabin for the 3-day journey ahead, he felt the life bond crystal pulse against his chest, reminding him that he was no longer alone in this vast and dangerous galaxy. Queen Lysara stood at the spaceport's observation deck, watching the ship disappear into the star-filled void. Through the bond, Marcus could feel her mixture of hope and fear, her desperate love for her daughter and her growing trust in the human warrior she had chosen as her champion. The first part of his journey was just beginning, but Marcus Chen had already taken the most important step of all. He had chosen to care about something more than his own survival, and that choice would echo through every battle, every wound, every scar that lay ahead in the darkness of the void sector. The journey to the edge of the void sector took 3 days, during which Marcus had plenty of time to study the intelligence files Queen Lysara had provided and to get used to the strange sensations of the life bond crystal. The ship's pilot was a taciturn Zarek veteran named Corvin who asked no questions and volunteered no information beyond the basic flight details. Marcus appreciated the professionalism. On the second day of travel, something unexpected happened. Marcus was running through combat scenarios in the ship's small training bay when he felt a sudden spike of pain through the bond connection. It wasn't his pain, it was Queen Lysara's, sharp and emotional rather than physical. Through their link, he caught fragmentary images, a heated argument in what looked like the royal palace, Prince Kalar's face twisted with anger, the flash of a ceremonial blade. The pain faded after a few minutes, but the connection remained. Marcus could sense Queen Lysara's continued distress, her fear not just for her daughter, but for her entire kingdom. Someone was making moves against her while she was vulnerable, probably hoping to force her into a position where she would have to choose between her crown and her child. Marcus had been in enough political situations during his military career to recognize the pattern. Prince Kalar wasn't just working with the Shadow Syndicate to kidnap Princess Zara, he was orchestrating a complete coup. The kidnapping was meant to paralyze Queen Lysara, keeping her focused on her daughter's safety while he consolidated power behind the scenes. That night, as the ship hurtled through hyperspace toward its destination, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. The Lifebond crystal seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, and through it he could feel Queen Lysara's own restless thoughts. She was awake too, probably standing on some palace balcony and staring out at the stars, wondering if she had made the right choice in trusting a human stranger with everything she held dear. On impulse, Marcus closed his eyes and tried to focus on the connection between them. He wasn't sure how the bond was supposed to work, but he attempted to project a sense of reassurance, of determination and competence. He wanted her to know that whatever happened, he would not give up. He would bring her daughter home or die trying. For a moment he thought he felt an answering warmth through the bond, as if she had received his message and was grateful for it. Then the sensation faded, leaving him alone with the hum of the ship's engines and the weight of the responsibility he had accepted. The ship dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates Queen Lysara had specified, at the edge of a nebula that marked the unofficial border of the Void Sector. Ahead lay a region of space that no legitimate government claimed, where the only law was the kind that could be enforced with superior firepower. "This is as far as I go," Corvin announced over the intercom. "Your transport is waiting in Docking Bay 2. Marcus gathered his gear and made his way to the docking bay, where a battered freight hauler was moored to the diplomatic ship. The hauler looked like it had seen better decades, with scorched hull plating and jury-rigged modifications that suggested a long history of questionable cargo runs. It was exactly the kind of ship that wouldn't attract attention in the Void Sector. The hauler's captain was a human woman who introduced herself only as Vera. She was perhaps 40 years old, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of lean build that came from years of recycled ship's air and processed food. Her eyes were sharp and alert, constantly scanning for threats. "You're the package?" she asked bluntly as Marcus climbed aboard. "I prefer to think of myself as cargo that shoots back," Marcus replied. Vera grinned at that. "Fair enough. I've been paid to take you to Korath Station and to forget I ever saw you. The trip will take about 18 hours through some very unfriendly space. You might want to strap in." The hauler's interior was as rough as its exterior, with exposed conduits running along the corridor walls and the constant background noise of overtaxed life support systems. Marcus found the passenger compartment, which consisted of a single acceleration couch and a tiny sanitary facility. It would have to do. As the hauler detached from the diplomatic ship and began its journey deeper into the Void Sector, Marcus reviewed his intelligence files one more time. Korath Station had originally been built as a mining platform around a dead planet rich in rare metals. Over the years, it had grown into a sprawling orbital city with a population approaching 2 million beings from dozens of different species. The station was divided into sectors, each controlled by a different criminal organization. The Shadow Syndicate controlled the core sectors, which included the high-security areas where important prisoners were held. According to Queen Lysara's sources, Princess Zara was being held in a detention facility in Core Sector 7, deep within Shadow Syndicate territory. The facility was heavily guarded and surrounded by civilian housing blocks, making a direct assault impossible without massive collateral damage. Marcus would have to find a way to get inside, locate the princess, and extract her without starting a war between the various criminal factions that maintain the station's delicate balance of power. The hauler shuddered as it encountered the first of many debris fields that littered the Void Sector. Marcus could hear Vera cursing creatively over the intercom as she maneuvered around the wreckage of some long-ago battle. Space in this region was a graveyard of ships and ambitions, a testament to the violent history of those who sought to make their fortunes outside the law. About 6 hours into the journey, the hauler's proximity alarms began screaming. Marcus strapped himself into the acceleration couch as he felt the ship's engine surge to maximum power. Through the small porthole, he could see the running lights of another vessel closing rapidly on their position. "Pirates!" Vera announced over the intercom. 3 ships, probably scavengers looking for easy prey. Hold on, this is going to get bumpy. What followed was a harrowing chase through an asteroid field, with Vera demonstrating piloting skills that bordered on the miraculous. The hauler might have looked like a derelict, but its engines had obviously been extensively modified. They managed to lose 2 of the pursuing ships in the asteroids, but the third was more persistent. Marcus felt the ship shudder as enemy weapons fire struck their rear shields. The lights flickered, and he could smell the acrid scent of overloaded circuits. Through the bond, he sensed Queen Lysara's sudden spike of alarm as she felt his own adrenaline surge. "I could use some help up here," Vera shouted over the noise of strained engines. Marcus unstrapped himself and made his way forward to the tiny bridge, where Vera was fighting with the controls as more weapons fire rocked the ship. The pursuing vessel was a sleek raider, built for speed and firepower rather than cargo capacity. "Do you have any weapons on this bucket?" Marcus asked. "Rear turret, but the targeting computer's been down for months. You'll have to aim manually." Marcus slid into the gunner's position and activated the weapon controls. The rear turret contained a pair of plasma cannons, old but serviceable. Through the targeting scope, he could see the raider closing in for another attack run. The ship was fast and maneuverable, but it was also showing signs of overconfidence. Marcus waited until the raider was committed to its attack vector, then opened fire. His first shots missed, but they forced the enemy pilot to break off and try a different approach. The second time the raider came in, Marcus was ready. His shots struck the enemy ship's port engine, sending it tumbling out of control into the asteroid field. "Nice shooting," Vera called out as they cleared the asteroids and jumped back into hyperspace. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." The rest of the journey passed without incident, and 17 hours after leaving the diplomatic ship, they dropped out of hyperspace within sight of Korath Station. Marcus had seen many impressive structures during his travels, but the station was something else entirely. It sprawled across nearly 50 kilometers of space, a chaotic mix of docking bays, habitat modules, industrial facilities, and entertainment districts. Neon signs in a dozen different languages advertised everything from luxury accommodations to illegal cybernetic modifications. "Welcome to the armpit of the galaxy," Vera said as she guided the hauler toward one of the many docking facilities. "Try not to get yourself killed before you finish whatever business brought you here." Marcus gathered his gear and prepared to disembark. His weapons were concealed in a cargo container that had been modified with hidden compartments, and his identification papers claimed he was a freelance ship engineer looking for work. It was a common enough profession in the void sector, where mechanical skills were always in demand and few questions were asked about a person's background. The docking bay was a maze of cargo containers and repair equipment, with beings of every imaginable species going about their business. The air was thick with industrial fumes and the sound of machinery, and Marcus could feel the subtle vibration of the station's massive gravity generators through the deck plating. Security was present but not oppressive, a few bored-looking guards who were more interested in collecting bribes than enforcing regulations. Marcus made his way through the customs checkpoint without incident. His forged papers passed inspection, and his cargo container was waved through after a cursory scan. The official in charge, a reptilian being with yellowed scales and too many teeth, barely looked up from his datapad as he stamped Marcus's entry permit. The station's main thoroughfare was like stepping into a different world. The corridor stretched for kilometers in both directions, lined with shops, restaurants, and establishments that catered to every conceivable vice. Holographic advertisements flickered overhead, and the air was filled with the sounds of a dozen different species conducting business in every language imaginable. Marcus found lodging at a small hotel that asked no questions and accepted payment in untraceable credits. His room was tiny and spartanly furnished, but it had a secure lock and a window that looked out onto one of the station's many interior courtyards. He stashed his gear in the hidden compartments he found behind the wall panels. Apparently the hotel's previous occupants had been in similar lines of work. That evening, Marcus began his reconnaissance of the station. He visited taverns and gambling dens, posing as a ship engineer looking for work and listening to the conversations around him. It didn't take long to learn that the Shadow Syndicate's territory was heavily restricted, with checkpoints at every access point and patrols that shot first and asked questions never. On his second day, Marcus got his first break. In a crowded cantina near the border between sectors, he overheard a conversation between two Shadow Syndicate enforcers who had been drinking heavily. They were complaining about increased security protocols in Core Sector 7, specifically around a detention facility that housed high-value assets. Extra shifts, double patrols, the works, one of them grumbled, all because some blue-skinned princess got herself kidnapped. As if anyone's going to be stupid enough to try a rescue mission in Syndicate territory. "I heard she's being held in the deep cells," the other replied. "Maximum security, psychic dampeners, the whole package. Whoever wants her back is going to have to go through half the Syndicate to get to her." Marcus filed the information away and continued his surveillance. Over the next few days, he mapped out the security patterns around Core Sector 7, identifying guard posts, patrol routes, and potential entry points. The challenge was daunting. The syndicate had turned the detention facility into a fortress, surrounded by layers of security that would challenge even a military assault team. But Marcus had advantages that a military team wouldn't have. He was alone, which made him harder to detect. He had enhanced abilities from the life bond crystal, though he hadn't yet had occasion to test them. Most importantly, he was motivated by something more powerful than orders or money. He was driven by the bond connection to Queen Lysara, and the growing determination to prove that her faith in him was justified. On his fourth night on the station, Marcus put his plan into motion. He had identified a maintenance tunnel that ran beneath Core Sector 7, part of the original mining infrastructure that had been built into the station's foundation. The tunnel was guarded, but not as heavily as the main access points. Marcus approached the tunnel entrance through a maze of service corridors, moving carefully to avoid the automated sensors. He could feel his heart racing as he drew closer to his objective, and through the bond he sensed Queen Lysara's answering tension. She was awake, probably pacing in her palace chambers, feeling his emotions as clearly as her own. The guard at the tunnel entrance was a massive being that looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros, armed with a plasma rifle and wearing heavy armor. Marcus studied the creature's patrol pattern for 20 minutes before making his move. When the guard turned to check his other direction, Marcus struck with silent efficiency. The fight was brief but vicious. The guard was strong and well-trained, but Marcus had the advantage of surprise and desperation. When it was over, he dragged the unconscious guard into a storage closet and sealed the door. The guard would live, but he would have a severe headache when he woke up. The maintenance tunnel was exactly as the station schematics had indicated, a narrow passage that ran for several kilometers through the station's superstructure. Marcus crawled through the claustrophobic space for what felt like hours, guided by a small handheld scanner that tracked his position relative to the detention facility above. When he finally reached the access point beneath the facility, Marcus encountered his first real test of the life bond crystal's power. The tunnel exit was sealed with an energy barrier that would have required special equipment to disable. But as Marcus placed his hands against the barrier, he felt the crystal pulse against his chest. Energy flowed through him, and to his amazement, the barrier began to fluctuate and weaken. Within minutes, he had created a gap large enough to slip through. On the other side, he found himself in the detention facility's lower levels, surrounded by the hum of security systems and the distant sound of guards making the rounds. The crystal had worked exactly as Queen Lysara had promised, granting him abilities that no normal human possessed. Now came the hard part. Different. He had to find Princess Zara among the hundreds of cells in the facility, extract her without triggering an alarm, and somehow get both of them back to safety through hostile territory. And he had to do it all while avoiding the kind of massive firefight that would endanger the civilian population living in the surrounding sectors. Marcus checked his weapons one final time, and began moving deeper into the facility. Through the bond, he could feel Queen Lysara's prayers and hopes flowing across the vast distance between them. He would not let her down. Whatever it took, whatever the cost to himself, he would bring her daughter home. The detention facility stretched out before him like a maze of corridors and security checkpoints, each one more heavily defended than the last. But Marcus Chen had come too far to turn back now. The real test of his courage and the power of the life bond crystal was about to begin. The detention facility's lower levels were a maze of reinforced corridors and automated security systems. Marcus moved through them like a ghost, using skills learned during his military career and enhanced by the growing power of the life bond crystal. The crystal seemed to respond to his need, sharpening his senses and reflexes beyond human norms. He could hear conversations between guards 3 levels above him, smell the fierce sweat of prisoners in nearby cells, and feel the vibrations of security drones moving through adjacent corridors. It was as if the crystal was gradually awakening abilities that had always been dormant in his genetic code, waiting for the right catalyst to unlock them. The facility's computer system proved more challenging than the physical security. Marcus had expected advanced encryption and multiple firewalls, but the Shadow Syndicate had taken extra precautions with their prisoner records. It took him nearly an hour of careful work to hack into the system without triggering any alarms, and when he finally accessed the prisoner database, he understood why the security was so tight. Princess Zara wasn't the only high-value prisoner in the facility. The Shadow Syndicate was holding nearly a dozen political figures, corporate executives, and military officers from across the galaxy. Each one represented a potential source of leverage or ransom, and their combined value probably exceeded the gross domestic product of several small worlds. According to the records, Princess Zara was being held in Cell Block Alpha 7 on the facility's 3rd sublevel. The area was designated as maximum security with psychic dampening fields to prevent telepathic communication and automated defense systems that could seal off entire sections if an escape attempt was detected. Marcus made his way through the service ducts and maintenance shafts. avoiding the main corridors where guard patrols were most frequent. The deeper he went into the facility, the more he could feel the weight of the place pressing down on him. This wasn't just a prison. It was a place designed to break the spirit of anyone unfortunate enough to be trapped within its walls. The psychic dampening fields became stronger as he approached cell block Alpha 7, and Marcus felt his connection to Queen Lysara begin to weaken. The comforting presence in his mind became fainter and more distant, until it was barely a whisper at the edge of his consciousness. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm him. The bond had become such a constant part of his awareness that its absence felt like losing one of his senses. But the life bond crystal continued to pulse against his chest, and gradually he realized that the dampening fields couldn't completely sever his connection to Queen Lysara. The bond was too deep, too fundamental, to be completely suppressed by technological means. It was still there, just muted and harder to access. Cell block Alpha 7 was a circular chamber with individual cells arranged around the perimeter. Each cell was a marvel of security technology, with force field barriers backed up by physical restraints and constant monitoring systems. Guards patrolled the central area in pairs, and Marcus could see automated weapons platforms mounted in the ceiling corners. He found Princess Zara in Cell 7 Alpha Prime, the most secure unit in the block. Through the one-way observation window, he could see her sitting on the edge of a simple cot, her blue skin pale with exhaustion and stress. She was still wearing the elegant dress she had been kidnapped in, though it was now torn and stained. Her elaborate bone ridges were unmarked, suggesting that her captors had been careful not to damage her physically, but Marcus could see the psychological toll the imprisonment had taken. She was staring at the wall with the kind of thousand-yard stare that Marcus recognized from his military days. It was the look of someone who had been pushed to the edge of their endurance and was struggling to hold on to their sanity. The sight filled him with rage that he had to struggle to contain. Marcus studied the cell's security systems for several minutes before he spotted the vulnerability he needed. The force field generators were powered by a central hub located beneath the cell block, and while the main power lines were heavily shielded, the backup systems ran through conduits that were accessible from the maintenance areas. He made his way to the power hub through a series of ventilation shafts, moving as quietly as possible to avoid detection. The hub was guarded by a single technician, who was more interested in his holographic entertainment than in monitoring the security displays. Marcus stunned him with a nerve strike that would keep him unconscious for hours, then got to work on the power systems. The backup power conduits were heavily armored, but Marcus found that the life bond crystal enhanced more than just his physical abilities. His understanding of technology seemed sharper, more intuitive, as if the crystal was allowing him to perceive patterns and connections that would normally be beyond human comprehension. Within minutes, he had rerouted the power flow to create a cascade failure that would shut down the force fields in Cell 7 Alpha Prime for exactly 37 seconds. It wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. Marcus made his way back to the cell block, timing his approach to coincide with the gap between guard patrols. He reached Princess Zara's cell just as the power fluctuation hit the force field generators. The shimmering barrier flickered and went dark, and Marcus stepped through the opening. Princess Zara looked up at him with startled purple eyes, clearly expecting another interrogation session. When she saw that he wasn't wearing Shadow Syndicate colors, hope and confusion warred on her face. "Who are you?" she whispered, glancing toward the cell entrance where the force field was already beginning to flicker back to life. "Marcus Chen, Your Highness. Your mother sent me." He showed her the life bond crystal, which pulsed with warm light at her proximity. "We need to go. Now." The princess needed no further convincing. She stood quickly, though Marcus could see that days of confinement had left her weak and unsteady. The force field snapped back to full power just as they stepped through the opening, and alarms began blaring throughout the facility. "How did you—" Princess Zara began. "Right now, we need to move." Marcus took her arm to steady her and was surprised by the jolt of energy that passed between them when they touched. The life bond crystal blazed with sudden brilliance, and he felt a surge of strength and clarity unlike anything he had experienced before. The alarms had brought the guards running, and Marcus could hear shouted orders echoing through the corridors as security teams mobilized to search for the escaped prisoner. He guided Princess Zara toward the maintenance shafts, but before they could reach cover, a squad of heavily armed guards rounded the corner ahead of them. What happened next would have been impossible for any normal human. The life bond crystals seemed to explode with power, flooding Marcus's system with energy that transformed him into something beyond baseline humanity. His reflexes became superhuman. His strength increased tenfold, and his perception of time seemed to slow to a crawl. He moved through the squad of guards like a force of nature, his enhanced abilities allowing him to anticipate their attacks and respond with devastating efficiency. When one of them fired a plasma rifle at Princess Zara, Marcus threw himself between them, taking the blast full in the chest. The pain was incredible, but even as the energy burned through his clothing and seared his flesh, Marcus felt the life bond crystal working to heal him. The wound began closing immediately, and the pain faded to a dull ache as new tissue formed to replace what had been destroyed. More importantly, he felt another surge of enhancement, as if the crystal was using his injury as fuel to make him even stronger. Princess Zara stared at him in amazement as he continued fighting despite injuries that should have been fatal. "You're bonded to my mother," she breathed. "I can feel it." Marcus dispatched the last of the guards and grabbed an assault rifle from one of the fallen enemies. "Can you run?" he asked. "I can do whatever I need to do," she replied, and Marcus heard echoes of her mother's determination in her voice. They made their way through the facility as security teams converged on their location from all directions. Marcus had to fight running battles at 3 different checkpoints, taking wounds that would have crippled an ordinary person but that the life bond crystal healed almost instantly. Each injury seemed to unlock new capabilities: enhanced speed after a leg wound, improved strength after damage to his arms, sharper reflexes after a head injury. By the time they reached the maintenance tunnels that led back to the lower levels, Marcus was operating on a level that bordered on the supernatural. He could predict enemy movements before they made them, react to threats before his conscious mind had even registered them, and endure damage that would have killed a dozen normal humans. But the most profound change was in his connection to Queen Lasara. Despite the psychic dampening fields, he could feel her presence more clearly than ever before. The bond had deepened with each wound he took in defense of her daughter, creating a link that transcended mere telepathy. He could sense her emotions, her thoughts, even her memories, and he knew that she was experiencing the same overwhelming connection. The tunnels beneath the detention facility were swarming with security teams, forcing Marcus and Princess Zara to take a longer route through the station's industrial sector. As they moved through the maze of pipes and machinery, Marcus found himself fighting not just the Shadow Syndicate's forces, but also mercenaries who had been hired to prevent their escape. One of these battles nearly ended their mission before it could be completed. A team of cybernetically enhanced assassins cornered them in a chemical processing plant, using the complex machinery as cover while they tried to capture Princess Zara alive. The fight was brutal, with Marcus taking injuries from plasma weapons, explosive devices, and monomolecular blades that could cut through steel, but each wound only made him stronger. The life bond crystal blazed like a star against his chest, pouring energy into his system faster than the assassins could damage it. By the end of the battle, Marcus was moving with inhuman grace and striking with the force of a guided missile. He had become something new, something that existed at the intersection of human determination and alien magic. Princess Zara fought alongside him with surprising skill, using improvised weapons and her natural Xeric agility to support his attacks. Marcus could see why Queen Lasara was so protective of her daughter. The girl had inherited her mother's warrior spirit along with her intelligence and compassion. "My mother chose well," she said as they paused to catch their breath after defeating the assassins. "I can feel the bond growing stronger." "You're not just protecting me. You're becoming part of our family." Marcus nodded, understanding for the first time the true scope of what Queen Lasara had offered him. The life bond crystal wasn't just a tool or a weapon. It was a gateway to a connection deeper than marriage, more fundamental than blood relation. With each act of courage, each wound taken in defense of what was precious to Queen Lasara, he was becoming more than human. They reached the outer edge of Core Sector 7 as security forces began sealing off the entire area. Marcus could see dropships deploying additional troops while automated defense systems came online throughout the sector. The Shadow Syndicate was taking no chances. They were turning their territory into a war zone rather than allow their most valuable prisoner to escape. But Marcus and Princess Zara were no longer the same people who had entered the detention facility. The life bond crystal had transformed them both, creating a connection that allowed them to move and fight as a single entity. When Marcus anticipated a threat, Princess Zara was already moving to counter it. When she spotted an opportunity, he was ready to exploit it before she could even voice the observation. Together, they fought their way through the security cordon and into the civilian sectors of the station. Here, among the shops and residences of Korath Station's more law-abiding citizens, they would have to find a way to reach the docking bays and escape before the Shadow Syndicate could mobilize their full resources. But Marcus knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. Getting off the station would be only the beginning of their troubles. The Shadow Syndicate would not simply let their most valuable prisoner disappear, and Prince Kalar's coup attempt on Xerxes Prime meant that they might not have a safe haven waiting for them even if they did escape. The life bond crystal pulsed steadily against his chest, and through it Marcus could feel Queen Lasara's mixture of relief and determination. She knew they had succeeded in the first phase of their mission, but she also understood that the real battle was just beginning. The bonds between them had grown stronger with each trial they faced, and Marcus was beginning to realize that his connection to the Zarek royal family might be the key to saving not just Princess Zara, but the entire kingdom. The transformation was far from complete, and the greatest tests of courage and sacrifice still lay ahead, in the darkness between the stars. The civilian sectors of Korath Station provided temporary refuge, but Marcus knew their safety was an illusion. Shadow Syndicate forces were systematically sealing off every docking bay and transport hub, turning the massive orbital city into an inescapable prison. Through the life bond crystal, he could sense Queen Lysara's growing anxiety as she monitored the situation from her palace on Zarathi Prime. Princess Zara had proven herself to be remarkably resilient during their escape, but Marcus could see the toll that days of captivity and the adrenaline-fueled flight had taken on her. Her blue skin had taken on a grayish tinge that suggested exhaustion, and despite her brave front, her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. They had taken shelter in a small apartment that Marcus had rented under a false identity, one of several safe houses he had established during his reconnaissance phase. The apartment overlooked a busy marketplace where beings of dozens of species conducted business in the organized chaos that characterized life on Korath Station. "How long before they find us?" Princess Zara asked, standing at the window and watching the activity below. "Not long," Marcus admitted, checking his weapons and equipment. "The Syndicate has resources we can't match in a straight fight. Our only advantage is that they can't destroy half the station just to capture us. Too many important people live here." Princess Zara turned away from the window, and Marcus was struck again by how much she resembled her mother. The same purple eyes, the same elegant bone ridges, the same mixture of vulnerability and steel that made Queen Lysara such a compelling leader. "My mother must be terrified," she said quietly. "I can feel her emotions through you sometimes when the crystal flares. She's trying to be strong, but she's afraid she's going to lose both her daughter and her kingdom." Marcus felt the truth of those words through his bond connection. Queen Lysara was indeed fighting a war on multiple fronts. Prince Kalar had used her distraction to consolidate his position within the royal court, turning several noble houses against her by arguing that her obsession with rescuing Princess Zara was compromising the security of the entire Zarek Empire. "She won't lose either," Marcus said firmly. "But we need to get off this station before the Syndicate decides that capturing us is worth starting a war with their other clients." He had been monitoring the security frequencies, and the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Shadow Syndicate had called in favors from several other criminal organizations, turning the search for Princess Zara into a station-wide manhunt. Bounty hunters, mercenaries, and assassins were arriving hourly, drawn by the astronomical reward the Syndicate was offering for their capture. Marcus's communication device chimed softly, and he checked the encrypted message that had just arrived. It was from Vera, the freighter captain who had brought him to Korath Station. "Heard you're having some trouble?" the message read. "If you need a ride out of this garbage heap, I'll be at Docking Bay 94 for exactly 1 hour, starting at 0300 station time. After that, you're on your own. The Syndicate is offering enough money to buy a new ship for anyone who turns you in, and my conscience isn't worth that much." Marcus checked his chronometer. It was currently 0145 station time, which gave them just over an hour to reach the docking bay. Under normal circumstances, it would be a simple 15-minute walk through the station's main thoroughfares. But with security forces covering every major route, they would have to take a much more dangerous path through the maintenance sections and industrial areas. "We're leaving," he told Princess Zara. "Get ready to move." As they prepared to venture back into the hostile environment of the station, Marcus felt the life bond crystal pulse with renewed energy. The connection to Queen Lysara was stronger than ever, and he could sense her desperate hope that he would succeed in bringing her daughter home safely. But he could also sense something else, a growing awareness that their bond had evolved beyond what either of them had expected. The crystal hadn't just enhanced his physical abilities and healing factor. It had created a connection between them that transcended species, distance, and time. He was becoming something unique in the galaxy, a human who carried within him the essence of Zarek royal power. They left the apartment through a service entrance and made their way into the station's maintenance network. The passages were darker and more cramped than the main corridors, filled with the constant noise of machinery and the acrid smell of industrial chemicals. Marcus led the way, his enhanced senses allowing him to navigate the maze of pipes and conduits while avoiding the automated security systems. Twice they encountered maintenance crews who were clearly working for the Shadow Syndicate, conducting routine inspections that were actually searches for the escaped prisoners. Both times Marcus was forced to fight, and both times he took injuries that would have been crippling to an ordinary human. A plasma burn across his back from an energy weapon, a deep gash in his shoulder from a vibroblade, a concussion from an explosive device that filled a corridor with shrapnel. Each wound healed almost immediately, and each injury triggered another wave of enhancement from the life bond crystal. By the time they reached the industrial sector near Docking Bay 94, Marcus was operating on a level that defied comprehension. His strength had increased to the point where he could tear through steel bulkheads with his bare hands. His speed and reflexes allowed him to dodge automatic weapons fire at point-blank range. His healing factor had become so efficient that wounds closed faster than they could be inflicted. But the most dramatic change was in his mental capabilities. The crystal seemed to be enhancing his intelligence and tactical awareness along with his physical abilities. He could process information and calculate probabilities at superhuman speed, anticipating enemy movements and planning countermeasures several steps ahead of any threat. Princess Zara watched these transformations with a mixture of awe and concern. "Is this what my mother expected to happen?" she asked during a brief rest stop. "I don't think anyone expected this," Marcus replied honestly. "The life bond is supposed to enhance the recipient gradually over time. What's happening to me is unprecedented." What he didn't tell her was that he could feel the bond connection deepening with each enhancement. Queen Lysara was experiencing every injury he took, every surge of power from the crystal, every moment of pain and triumph. The connection between them was becoming so intimate that he sometimes had trouble determining where his thoughts ended and hers began. They were approaching Docking Bay 94 when the trap was sprung. Marcus sensed the ambush seconds before it materialized, his enhanced awareness picking up the subtle signs that enemies were lying in wait. But there was nowhere to retreat. The Shadow Syndicate had positioned their forces to drive him and Princess Zara toward this specific location, where they could be captured or killed without endangering innocent civilians. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. A squad of heavily armed mercenaries emerged from concealed positions behind cargo containers, while automated weapons platforms rose from hidden recesses in the deck plating. At the same time, a team of cybernetically enhanced assassins dropped from the ceiling, using grappling lines to position themselves for a coordinated strike. Marcus threw himself into the battle with berserker fury, knowing that this was likely their last chance to reach safety. The life bond crystal blazed like a miniature sun against his chest, pouring power into his system faster than ever before. He moved through the enemy forces like an avatar of destruction, his enhanced abilities allowing him to fight dozens of opponents simultaneously. But even with his superhuman capabilities, he was vastly outnumbered. The Shadow Syndicate had committed serious resources to this ambush, bringing in some of the most dangerous killers in the galaxy. Marcus fought with everything he had, but he was gradually being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. It was Princess Zara who turned the tide of the battle. As Marcus engaged the mercenaries and assassins, she made her way to one of the automated weapons platforms and began working on its control systems. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency over the alien interface, and Marcus realized that her royal education had included more than just diplomacy and statecraft. Within minutes, she had reprogrammed the weapons platform to target the Shadow Syndicate forces instead of the escaped prisoners. The heavy plasma cannon swiveled toward the enemy positions and opened fire, devastating their ranks and forcing the survivors to retreat. But the victory came at a terrible cost. As the weapons platform turned on its former allies, one of the assassins managed to get through Marcus's defenses and fire a high-energy beam directly at Princess Zara. Marcus saw the attack coming and threw himself between the weapon and its target, taking the full force of the blast in his chest. The pain was beyond description. The beam weapon had been designed to penetrate heavy armor and cause massive tissue damage, and even Marcus's enhanced healing factor couldn't cope with injuries of that magnitude. He fell to his knees, feeling his life force ebbing away despite the crystal's desperate attempts to repair the damage. But something extraordinary happened as Princess Zara knelt beside him, her hands glowing with the same energy that powered the life bond crystal. She was somehow sharing her own life force with him, channeling energy through their connection to Queen Lysara and the royal bloodline itself. "You're not dying on my watch," she said fiercely, and Marcus could hear echoes of her mother's voice in the words, "My family doesn't abandon those who serve with honor." The combined power of the life bond crystal and Princess Zara's intervention pulled Marcus back from the edge of death, but the healing process transformed him even further. When he stood up, he was no longer entirely human. His eyes blazed with inner fire, his skin had taken on a subtle luminescence, and he radiated an aura of power that made even the hardened criminals around him step back in fear. The remaining Shadow Syndicate forces fled rather than face this transformed figure, and Marcus and Princess Zara made their way to Docking Bay 94 just as Vera's freighter was preparing to depart. "You look different," Vera observed as they climbed aboard her ship. "More intense. What the hell happened to you down there?" "Evolution," Marcus replied, feeling the truth of the word as he spoke it. As the freighter lifted off from Korath Station and headed for the edge of the Void Sector, Marcus felt Queen Lysara's overwhelming relief and joy flowing through their bond connection. But he could also sense something else, a profound change in the nature of their relationship. The life bond had evolved beyond its original purpose, creating a connection that went far deeper than the magical enhancement of a loyal servant. Princess Zara settled into the acceleration couch beside him as the freighter entered hyperspace. "My mother will want to thank you properly when we reach home," she said. "I suspect she'll want to do more than just thank you." Marcus nodded, feeling the truth of those words through the bond connection. Queen Lysara's emotions had shifted from gratitude and relief to something much more complex and intimate. The trials they had shared, the pain they had experienced together through the crystal's connection, had forged a bond that transcended the formal relationship between a ruler and her champion. But as they hurtled through hyperspace towards Zarathi Prime, Marcus could also sense the growing crisis that awaited them there. Prince Kalara had used their absence to consolidate his power, and several noble houses had declared their support for his claim to the throne. Queen Lysara would need more than a rescued daughter to secure her kingdom. She would need a champion powerful enough to face an entire army of traitors and political enemies. The transformation that had begun with a simple mercenary contract was far from complete. The greatest tests of courage, love, and sacrifice still lay ahead in the political maelstrom of the Zarek royal court, and Marcus was beginning to understand that his destiny was tied not just to Queen Lysara's fate, but to the future of an entire civilization that hung in the balance between honor and betrayal. The journey back to Zarathi Prime took 4 days, during which Marcus underwent the most profound transformation of his life. The life bond crystal had evolved beyond its original purpose, becoming a conduit for power that flowed not just from Queen Lysara, but from the entire legacy of the Zarek royal bloodline. He could feel the strength of generations of warrior kings and queens flowing through him, each one adding their essence to his enhanced capabilities. Princess Zara watched this transformation with fascination and growing concern. "You're changing faster than my mother anticipated," she observed as they sat in the freighter's small common area. "The bond usually takes months or years to reach full integration. What's happening to you is unprecedented." Marcus flexed his hands, watching energy patterns dance beneath his skin like living lightning. "I think it's because of what we went through on Korath Station. Each time I was injured protecting you, the crystal didn't just heal me. It made me more attuned to your family's life force. The connection runs deeper than anyone expected." Through the bond, he could feel Queen Lysara's constant presence in his mind, her emotions a complex mixture of relief, love, and desperate concern for the political crisis engulfing her kingdom. Prince Kalar had moved quickly during their absence, using carefully orchestrated propaganda and political pressure to turn several noble houses against the queen. He was claiming that her obsession with rescuing Princess Zara had compromised the security of the entire empire. "My cousin is clever," Princess Zara said, reading the intelligence reports that Queen Lysara had transmitted to their ship. "He's not openly challenging my mother's right to rule. He's just positioning himself as the only alternative when she inevitably fails to protect the kingdom from its enemies." Marcus studied the tactical situation through his enhanced awareness, processing information at superhuman speed. The political landscape of the Zarek Empire was complex, with dozens of noble houses maintaining their own military forces and territorial interests. Prince Collar had managed to unite several of the most powerful houses behind his cause, creating a coalition that commanded nearly 40% of the Empire's total military strength. But Marcus could also see weaknesses in Collar's position. The prince's alliance was built on promises and political convenience, rather than genuine loyalty. Many of the noble houses that supported him would switch sides if they believed Queen Lysara offered a better chance of protecting their interests. "We need to demonstrate strength," Marcus said. "Your mother's enemies see her as weak because she allowed personal considerations to override political necessity. We have to prove that rescuing you was actually a strategic victory that strengthened the Empire." Princess Zara nodded thoughtfully. "And how do you propose we do that?" Marcus felt the life bond crystal pulse against his chest, and suddenly he could see the path forward with crystalline clarity. The transformation he had undergone wasn't just about personal enhancement. It was about becoming a symbol of the royal family's power and legitimacy. Queen Lysara had chosen a human champion not because humans were inherently superior, but because the act of transcending species barriers demonstrated the true scope of royal authority. "We're going to show them what the life bond can do when it's fully awakened," Marcus said. "Your mother didn't just hire a mercenary. She created a new kind of royal guardian, one that represents the evolution of Zarek power into something that can protect the Empire from any threat." The freighter dropped out of hyperspace within sight of Zarathi Prime, and Marcus felt his connection to Queen Lysara strengthen dramatically as they approached the planet. The bond had become so intimate that he could sense her physical location within the royal palace, feel her heartbeat synchronizing with his own across the vast distance that still separated them. But he could also sense the danger gathering around her. Prince Kalar's forces were positioning themselves throughout the capital city, not yet openly hostile but clearly preparing for decisive action. The political situation was like a powder keg waiting for the right spark to ignite it into civil war. As their ship descended through the atmosphere toward the royal spaceport, Marcus was surprised to see Queen Lysara waiting for them on the landing platform. She stood alone except for a small honor guard, her elegant form silhouetted against the setting sun of Zerathi Prime. The sight of her sent a surge of emotion through the life bond connection that was so intense it was almost painful. The moment the ship's ramp lowered, Princess Zara ran to her mother's arms. Marcus followed more slowly, still adjusting to the dramatic changes in his appearance and capabilities. He was no longer the simple human mercenary who had accepted Queen Lysara's contract just days earlier. The life bond crystal had transformed him into something unique in the galaxy, a being that existed at the intersection of human determination and Zarek mystical power. Queen Lysara's purple eyes widened as she saw him approach. Through their bond connection, Marcus could feel her amazement at the extent of his transformation. He was taller than before, his frame filled out with enhanced muscle mass that somehow managed to look natural rather than artificial. His skin had taken on a subtle luminescence that was barely visible in daylight but became more pronounced in shadow. Most dramatically, his eyes now carried flecks of the same purple color that marked Zarek royalty. "Marcus," she breathed, reaching out to touch his face with trembling fingers. "What have you become?" "What you made me," he replied, covering her hand with his own. "What your daughter helped me become." Something new. The reunion was interrupted by the arrival of a military convoy led by Prince Kalar himself. The prince was an impressive figure in his own right, tall and broad-shouldered, with the elaborate bone ridges that marked him as a member of the royal bloodline. But where Queen Lysara radiated dignity and wisdom, Kalar projected arrogance and barely restrained ambition. "Cousin," he said as he dismounted from his armored transport, flanked by a full company of elite guards. "I'm so relieved to see that Zara has been returned safely, though I must question the wisdom of sending a single human mercenary to accomplish what an entire military task force should have handled." Marcus felt Queen Lysara's flash of anger through their bond connection, but her voice remained steady as she replied. "The mission succeeded with minimal casualties and no diplomatic complications. I would call that an unqualified success." Prince Kalar's gaze fixed on Marcus, and there was undisguised hostility in his expression. "Indeed, though I'm curious about the modifications that your champion seems to have undergone. Is it wise to place such trust in alien magic, especially when it transforms someone so dramatically?" "A life bond is an ancient Zarek tradition," Queen Lysara replied, "one that has served our people well for thousands of years. When it was used to enhance Zarek warriors," Kalar countered, "this human has been changed by powers he cannot possibly understand. How do we know he hasn't been corrupted by the process? How do we know his loyalty is genuine rather than artificially induced?" Marcus felt the life bond crystal pulse with energy as his enhanced senses detected the subtle signs of aggressive intent in Kalar's body language. The prince wasn't just making political arguments. He was preparing to make a direct challenge, probably hoping to provoke Marcus into some kind of rash action that could be used to discredit Queen Lysara. "My loyalty," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before the transformation, "was earned through choice and sacrifice, not magic. The life bond crystal enhances what was already there. It doesn't create loyalty where none existed." Prince Kalar smiled coldly. "Easily said, but how can we trust the word of someone who has been so fundamentally altered? Perhaps a demonstration is in order. If you truly serve the royal family's interests, you should be willing to prove your worthiness through trial by combat." The challenge hung in the air like a blade, and Marcus could feel the political calculations clicking into place through his enhanced awareness. This was the trap Kalar had been setting from the moment he arrived. If Marcus refused the challenge, it would make him look weak and Queen Lysara look foolish for trusting him. If he accepted and lost, it would demonstrate that the life bond had been a failed experiment. But if he accepted and won decisively, it would prove that Queen Lysara's choices had strengthened rather than weakened the Empire. "I accept," Marcus said, before Queen Lysara could object. Through their bond connection, he projected confidence and determination, trying to reassure her that he knew what he was doing. The trial by combat was held that evening in the royal palace's ceremonial arena, a circular chamber with tiered seating that had been the site of formal duels for centuries, Representatives from dozens of noble houses gathered to witness the contest, their presence making it clear that this was about much more than a simple test of martial skill. Prince Kalar had chosen his champion carefully, a massive Zarek warrior named Vorthak who stood nearly 3 meters tall and was legendary for his prowess in single combat. The warrior was armed with traditional Zarek weapons and wore ceremonial armor that had been passed down through generations of his family. Marcus, by contrast, stood in the center of the arena wearing simple clothing and carrying only the life-bond crystal, which now hung openly around his neck where everyone could see its pulsing light. He looked almost fragile compared to his enormous opponent, a fact that Prince Kalar's supporters were quick to point out. "This is madness," Princess Zara whispered from her place in the royal viewing box. "Vorthak has never been defeated in single combat. He's killed dozens of opponents over the years." Queen Lysara placed a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder, but Marcus could feel her own anxiety through their bond connection. She believed in the power of the life bond crystal, but even she wasn't certain that it could overcome such overwhelming physical disadvantages. The combat began at the traditional signal, the tolling of an ancient bell that had called Zarek warriors to battle for millennia. Vorthak charged immediately, his massive warhammer swinging in an arc that would have crushed an ordinary human to pulp. But Marcus was no longer ordinary. The life bond crystal blazed with power as he moved, his enhanced speed and reflexes allowing him to dodge the attack by millimeters. He struck back with his bare hands, his enhanced strength driving his fist into Vorthak's armored side with enough force to dent the metal plating. The battle that followed was unlike anything the assembled nobles had ever witnessed. Vorthak was a master of traditional combat techniques, using his size and strength to devastating effect, but Marcus fought with a fluidity and grace that defied physics, moving like liquid lightning while striking with the force of a particle beam. Each exchange of blows demonstrated new aspects of Marcus's transformation. When Vorthak's hammer finally connected, breaking several of Marcus's ribs, the wounds healed visibly as the watching crowd gasped in amazement. When the giant warrior's blade opened a gash across Marcus's chest, the blood that flowed glowed with the same light as the life bond crystal before the wound sealed itself. But the most dramatic demonstration came when Vorthak managed to pin Marcus against the arena wall. Marcus caught the massive weapon with his bare hands and, as the crowd watched in stunned silence, slowly bent the metal shaft until it snapped in half. The psychological impact of that moment was decisive. Vorthak staggered backward, staring at his broken weapon in disbelief, while the assembled nobles erupted in amazed conversation. Marcus pressed his advantage, moving with inhuman speed to disable his opponent without causing permanent injury. When the combat ended with Vorthak unconscious on the arena floor, the chamber fell completely silent. Marcus stood in the center of the arena, the life bond crystal blazing like a star against his chest, his body unmarked despite the fierce battle he had just fought. Prince Kalar's face was pale with shock and rage, but he was forced to acknowledge Marcus's victory according to the ancient traditions. "The champion has proven his worth," he said through gritted teeth. "But this demonstration raises questions about the nature of the power he wields. Is it truly Zarek magic, or something else entirely?" Queen Lysara rose from her seat in the royal viewing box, her voice carrying clearly throughout the arena. "The power comes from the life bond crystal, which has been attuned to the royal bloodline for thousands of years. What you have witnessed is not corruption or alien influence. It is the full flowering of an ancient tradition, adapted to meet the challenges of a new age." She gestured to Marcus, who moved to stand beside the royal viewing box. "This man has proven his loyalty through sacrifice and courage. He has rescued my daughter from the heart of enemy territory and demonstrated that the strength of our house transcends species barriers. Those who question his worthiness question the judgment of the royal family itself." The political implications of her words were unmistakable. By publicly endorsing Marcus and the transformation he represented, Queen Lysara was making it clear that opposition to him constituted rebellion against the crown. Several of the noble houses that had been supporting Prince Kalar began exchanging worried glances. But Kalar wasn't finished. "Cousin," he said, his voice carrying a note of desperate cunning, "you speak of loyalty and sacrifice, but what guarantees do we have? This human may serve you faithfully now, but what happens when his enhanced abilities make him believe he deserves to rule rather than serve?" Marcus felt the life bond crystal pulse with energy as he prepared to respond, but Queen Lysara spoke first. "That question answers itself through the nature of the bond we share." She stood and moved to stand beside Marcus in the